All right, I think that rather than going over the next chapter, let's look at this at the first bank account test. All right, I just sent you all a thing that unfortunately I copied an old email, so it's got the wrong date on it. But you just got sent this. If you care, what this has in it, just so you see this, is I took all the comments from the actual test page and I put them in a text file. Does that make sense? So what we're going to do is, and I got to find it, is I've got to find the actual test. So it's in here someplace, probably in here. All right, so Java, Chapter 6-09 test. So this was the test. All right, now I'm going to start by thinking about this. Okay, so first of all, what do I have? I've got 3 instance variables. All right, you should know by now, everybody in here should know this, that those variables, after I create my class, okay, they're basically going to be about the first thing I do. Does that make sense? Also, those are variables, and I'm not going to initialize any of those variables. Don't initialize instance variables. Only initialize class variables. All right, then I'm going to create 2 constructors. A no-arg constructor that does all this stuff, and a full-arg constructor that does all of this stuff. I'm asking you this question. Reading step 1 and step 2 that's on the screen right now. And please, just be honest with me. Do you understand what you are being asked to do in step 1 and step 2? Does everybody in here understand that? You are to create 2 constructors. One will have no parameters. That's our no-arg constructor. The other one will have all 3 of the parameters. So it will expect that you pass in a first name, a last name, and an account number. All that makes sense? And the initial balance here, we'll set it to 25. And in here, all right, greater than or equal to 25. All right. Is everybody comfortable with setting, creating your own getters and setters? Not the code, but the way that you do that. Is everybody comfortable with clicking code, generate, and then either doing your getters first, then your setters, or doing getters and setters when you get getter, setter, getter, setter, getter, setter, etc.? All right. So what I'm asking is, I'm not talking about all the code that goes in there, but is there anything before we get to actually talking about the driver that people don't understand what I was asking you to do? Any questions? All right. Then we get to the driver. Now, the only reason that I put that array in there was because we'd gone over a chapter on arrays. That said, this was not a good application to use arrays for, just so you know. It wasn't. You ended up writing a lot of code that you would have written anyway, except that you had to give it an array name and you had to use brackets. But other than that, it looked a lot like if you did it without arrays. But you were supposed to create a driver with an array of 5 bank account objects. What that says is, in that driver, somewhere near the top, you're going to say bank account, bracket, bracket, give it a name, like accounts or whatever, equal new bank account with a size. That should make sense to all of you. All right? And then it was just a matter of testing everything that we put in there. Okay? That was this stuff. And then we were supposed to keep track of the initial balance, etc., all that other good stuff. All right? So, I'm just going to start from the beginning. If you have a question, ask. If you want to follow along, I'll try to do it fairly slowly. That said, again, some of you type really slow. And I don't want to sit there and, if we spend an hour or 2 on this, that's fine. We shouldn't have to spend the rest of the period going over this. All right? But I'm going to start. So I'm going to start up IntelliJ IDEA. I'm going to take what I had here. This was an old thing. Close it. All right. And I want to see if I've got a bank account on my desktop itself. In fact, no, I'll do it like this. I'm going to come in and I'm going to create mine my project name. Here's another thing. Again, I'm asking the question because I don't know. This is where I've got all my Java programs, okay? This is the one that I created as the key for your test. There is nothing that says the name of the project has to be the same name as the name of your class. I did it because I thought it was convenient to do that. But since I already have one in here that's called bank account, I'm going to create a new folder right here. Oops. I'm going to create a new folder right here that I'm just going to call bank account test 1. All right. Then next week we'll go over and I'll create bank account test 2. All right. So I've got that. There that is. And I'm going to come up, start my new project, and create new project. No one has ever said they don't understand this, so I'm taking for granted that you know this. The weird thing, just so you know, and I find this strange, when I grade your tests, I grade them off of the E drive. Okay, that's the drive where I put all of your information. And when I do that for about half of yours, when I bring it up, it loses this connection right here. It says I don't have a JDK. But when I click the down arrow, it says, do you want to use the default one? And as soon as I use it, then it resumes the connection. And I don't know why that happens. I could understand it if it happens to everybody. But for about half of you it happens, and about half of you it doesn't happen. That makes absolutely zero sense to me. None. All right. So I've already got that set. I'm just going to choose all of the defaults next. No template next. I'm going to give it that path. So this is going to be my brand new bank account test 1. So that's what it's going to be called. Finish. So I now have a folder that's called bank account test 1. All right. There is absolutely nothing that says that in that folder I have to create my class, and I can call it bank account. That's fine. That's what I'm going to do. All right. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to right mouse click on the source folder. When it eventually comes up, I'm going to do a new Java class. All right. And again, I showed you this before, but if you look on the screen, if I type in here right now edu.rankin.jpscott.bankaccount, it will create both the class and it will create the package. That makes sense? I can also go in here, right mouse click on source and choose new package. Like this. Then just say edu.rankin.jpscott. Now the package is there. Then I can come in here and just do a right mouse click, new Java class, and I don't have to give it that name. The path rather, I can just say bank account. B-A-N-K-A-C-C-O-U-N-T. All right? All that makes sense. I'm just going to keep going until somebody says, hey, that what you just did, I didn't understand. I just come in here and I put comments in that delimit the beginning of my class and the end of my class. You don't have to do that. All right. Also, right up at the top of this, right before the actual code. Again, I just told you this. I sent you an email with this file in it. This had all of the different information about this. So I'm going to grab this. I'm copying it to the clipboard. And I'm going to paste it in. So now I've got a little prologue. By no means did you have to do that. All right? But I'm trying to make it look basically like my own key that I wrote before. All right. Now, I know two things about this particular program. All right? I know that I'm going to be doing something sooner or later, I believe. Is this the one? Where I'm going to, we'll start with this. I know that sooner or later, what I'm going to want to do in here is I'm going to be wanting to print out information with dollars and cents. So I'm going to create a new decimal format object. All right? So I'm going to do that right up near the top right here. It doesn't matter really where you do it. So I'm just going to do it you know, right after this line that's right here. Okay, so I'm going to say here, declare program constants. And when I declare them, I guess I'm also initializing them. All right. And the first thing is what we were told to do. I'm looking again back at the specs. And it said we were supposed to have a no-arg constructor, and we are supposed to have an account number that is between 1,000 and 10,000, if this is the right one. I think this is the right test. Make sure I'm giving you the right test. No, that's the newer test. That's it here. All right. So I'm going to have a random number between 1,000 and 10,000, correct? If I want a random number between 1,000 and 10,000, I know I'm going to have constants for each one of those. So I said final int, what did I call them? I call them min account number, and I call them max account number. Min account number I set equal to 1,000, and max account number I set equal to 10,000. All right. I'm also told that I want to make sure that my initial balance has a minimum initial balance of $25. Now, I'm asking you again, I'm asking you this question. Do I need comments right there for those? Do they all make sense as far as what they're attempting to do? All right. I know that I'm going to end up having a decimal format object in here, and I'm going to do random numbers. I know that because I read the specs. All right. So I don't have to do it here, but I just put my import statements up right here. So I'm going to import java.text.decimal format, and I'm going to import java.util.random. You'll notice right now they're in gray. If you look on the screen, they're in gray because neither one of them is currently being used. Does that make sense? As soon as I start using them, they'll go to like a light color black. So I have now created I've added my import statements. And again, notice what I get right here. Unused import statement. All right. I am going to use it. And right here it'll tell me field min account number is never used. Plus, if I go up here, notice I'm already getting, those are my warnings, but I'm getting typos. The system looks through its own dictionary and it doesn't see a term in there called min ACCT number, max ACCT number, or min balance. That's what those three typos are. All right? Okay, so I'm going to come in here, and the first thing I want to do, and I'll put some delimiters in here just so you see them, is I'm going to say declare instance variables. All right? Now, every single account that I have is going to have these. So, string first name, string last name, int ACCT number. Those are the three things that every single bank account has. Did everybody hear that? That's what every single bank account will have. In addition, all right, we needed a double that had our initial balance. Again, I'm trying to use names that I think make it easy for you to see what it is, so I don't have to be constantly writing a lot of comments. All right? Now, one thing I have to keep track of for each person is the balance. So for each person, I need to know their balance. I need to know their total number of deposits. I need to know their total number of withdrawals. I need to know their total deposit amount. I need to know their total withdrawal amount. Everybody hear that? I need those 5 things. I don't, even though each person has their own, I don't consider those per se to be instance variables. Instance variables to me are what I'm going to do my getters and setters on. These things, I'm going to be doing them inside of other getters and setters. So I put them down here. I just put a space between there. You don't have to, and it doesn't mean anything. Int total deposits. And I initialize that to 0. Int total withdrawals. And I initialize that to 0. All right. Then I had double deposit amount, and I set that equal to 0.0 double withdrawal amount, and I set that equal to 0.0. And then finally I had current balance, and I set that equal to 0.0. Now, go ahead and put that in, but what I'm more concerned with is after you do that, take a look at it and you tell me, is there any variable that's in there, either because of its name or something else, that doesn't make sense to you? Yes?
I thought we don't initialize instance variables.
You missed what I just said. I don't consider these 5 to actually be instance variables. I look at these as basically they're accumulators. These are not going to have their own getters and setters.
Right.
So in my mind, even though they're used as instance variables, they're not instance variables. I don't know if what I just said makes sense or not. I don't know if there is another name, and if you had somebody who was much more a Java purist than I was, they probably would come in and say, you know what, instructor, you're full of it. And the other thing is, if I was going to initialize them, let's say I left the initialization off, I would be doing it then inside of the constructor.
Are you doing that because if you don't, they're no?
No, they're technically these instance variables, I think they're going to be set to 0 anyway. All right, I'm just doing it for my own sake, for consistency's sake, whatever you want to call it. All right. Any questions on what the meaning is of any of those variables? All right. So then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create my no-arg constructor. Now you know as well as I do it's going to have to be public, and then bank account. All right. Put comments here to delimit my beginning and my ending. Okay. And in this one, what did it, let's look at the specs and see what it says. All right. It says I should set the first name to ULN, the last name, well, that's a mistake. That should have been UFN, but I think everybody gets that. All right, the last name to ULN, the account number to a random number between 1,000 and 10,000, and the initial balance to 25. All right, again, Colin, to go back to your point, some people with what I'm about to show you would mean don't type this. They would write it like this. They would write this dot first name equals, all right, sorry, this should be a little f, equals UFN. Again, I'm going to change this in a minute. This dot last name equals ULN. All right, this dot account number equals, we're going to have to do some work for that to do the random number. I'm just going to put 10 for now, just so I've got something thrown in there. All right, and this dot initial balance equals 25. So what I'm telling you, I wouldn't do it like this. But some people who are Java purists say, that's what the specs say, that's what you should do. And it will work just fine if you do that. But I'm going to show you, so I'm going to just comment these out. So I wouldn't do it this way, but you can do it that way and make it work. This is how I'm writing it. All right? So I'm going to say set first name. I'm going to get an error because I don't have a first name yet, a set routine. Set last name. I'm getting errors for all these because I haven't written my setters and getters yet. Set account number. And I'll just put it here as 0. And set, what did I call this? I actually called it a CT number, so that should work. But I call this initial balance. So set initial balance. And I'm going to pass that 25. All right. Now I'm getting errors in here because, again, I have not yet written these routines. Did everybody hear that? I'm okay with that. I'm going to write those routines, but I'm going to wait until I write my other constructor. If you look up on the screen, please, everybody, the other constructor is almost like this one. So I'm just going to grab all of that. I'm going to grab every bit of it, and I'm going to paste it in right below what I have. But I'm going to say for this one, I'm going to have a string for my first name, a string for my last name, an int for my account number, and a double for my initial balance. All right? Again, I'm asking you this question because I don't know the answer. That is, please take a look at this and you tell me if there's something that's in here right now that I'm doing that does not make sense. You have to ask. Now, when I call set first name, what am I passing in? Please look on the screen. FN, right? I'm getting a first name passed in. I'm getting a last name passed in. I'm getting an account number passed in. And I'm getting an initial balance passed in. All right? So these are my two constructors. There's the no arg. And I'm just going to remove this. So there's my no arg constructor, and there's what I called my full arg constructor. Is there anything that we've done so far that doesn't make sense to anyone? I'll give you a second, so if you're still typing or whatever, you can catch up. All right, so now I've written both of my constructors. So what's next? The answer is my getters and my setters. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom. And where I am right here, I'm going to do my code generate. I like to do getters first, and I want to do a getter for first name, last name, account number, and initial balance. Those four. So again, code, generate, getter, choose first name, choose last name, choose account number, and choose initial balance. All right, after I do that, okay, now I'm going to go in here and just clean these up a little bit, because this is how I do it. I don't know why. I mean, we're all weird in our own way. Maybe I'm weirder than most. I don't know. But there's my first getter. There is my second getter. There is my third getter. Oops, I guess I skipped one. So there is my third getter, and there is my fourth getter. Does everybody understand what the getters are? Again, it's the first day of class. The guy over there in the red shirt raises his hand, and I say, "What's your name?" And he says, "Amin." That is me calling get first name. All right, that's exactly what we're doing right there. All right. So now that I've done my getters, I'm ready to go in and do my setters. So again, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to click Code, Generate, Setter, and I want to choose the same 4 fields. So first name, last name, account number, and initial balance. I click OK, and now I have my 4 setters. All right. Again, I'm just going to clean this up the way that I clean it up. Again, I should not have to go in and make changes to any of my getters. All right? I will have to go in and change my setters. Okay? Now, again, I'm just showing you the protocol, the way I do things. If you think, Jeff, the way you do things is weird, or it stinks, or whatever, you should do it the way that makes sense for you. All right? First thing I like to do is I don't like to use the same name, even if I use this. So I'm going to change that to FN for first name. I'm going to change this one to LN for last name. So I'm going to make my setters, and I'm changing the parameter to FN, the second one to LN, the third one to AN, and the fourth one to IB. You don't have to do that. It's just the way I do things. All right? So, what are we saying? There's 2 ways that you can write this. I'm just going to show you how I wrote it. All right, so I said, we've gotten to the point where we are in this class that line 154 that you see right here, this line, you should all understand how that works. Every one of you should. I don't care how you've been doing on tests, because we've done this enough on homework assignments that should make sense. In English, it's saying if I put anything in for the first name, I don't care what it is, then take that anything I put in and assign it to my instance variable. If I put nothing in, then take that and assign it to the instance variable. That should make sense to each and every one of you. And the good news is, the one for last name is exactly the same. The only difference is, I go in here and I change it from FN to LN. Again, I'm asking the question. Right there are 2 of my 4 setters. Does anybody have a question over what either one of those setters are doing? Okay. And I'm to the point now where sometimes I think, maybe Valerie thinks, yeah, I got a question, but I'm not going to ask because I don't want to sound silly. If you feel that way, I know you don't, but if you feel that way, then write me an email. and tell me that you're having problems with something. The big problem is, now Ethan has volunteered to tutor the first year people. We don't have anybody here or at St. Louis to tutor second year people. So if you're really struggling, there's really no one who's set up as a tutor here. There are probably people in this room, I'm sure there are, who could tutor. Now that would assume they would like to tutor, and they may want to and they may not. All right? So here's the question. From what we've done so far, I'm picking it up right here. The import statements. All right? The 3 constants. The 4 instance variables. The 5 quasi-instance variables. The no-arc constructor. The full-arc constructor. Any getters. The 4 getters. So far, we've done 2 setters. This is my question. Is there anything we've done so far that people do not understand? Anything? Okay. So what's left is to set our account number and to set our initial balance. All right? So for the account number, we were supposed to generate, okay, a value between 1,000 and 10,000. I went and didn't remember how to do this, so I looked online and I typed in int temp equals new random dot next int, and they suggest you use like 9,000 plus 1,000. That should give you a number that exists between 1,000 and 9,000. All right? Now, could it be, I'm sorry, between 1,000 and 10,000? Okay? Are there other ways of doing it? Of course there are. Okay? Of course there are. Now, the next test that I put in here, do people know what the word superfluous means? All right? I'm putting in a test that I should never have to use. This test that we're putting in here should never come back and say, wow, no, it didn't work. But I'm doing it anyway. So I said this dot account number equals, and I said if the account number that you pass in, this one here, I guess that could be bad. So if that is less than, or if it's less than the minimum account number, all right? So if it's less than that, or that is greater than the max account number, okay? Should we put a paren there? Oops, AN, I'm sorry. There, where's that there? This, that doesn't go there. That goes here. I'll give you a second to write that up. Then we've got to do our initial balance, write our deposit, write our withdrawal, overwrite our toString, and we're done with this one. Okay? This makes sure that the number that's passed in here, right there, is within range. And if it's not within range, meaning it's less than 1,000 or it's greater than 10,000, then I want to take this random number that I generated here and set the account number equal to that. Otherwise, it is within range, so I'm just taking the number and setting that to account number. Does that make sense? And again, there are a lot of ways that this could be done. Okay? I could have reversed the logic and I could have said, if it's greater than or equal to minimum and it's less than or equal to maximum, then I could have said AN and I could have put here colon temp. So there's a lot of ways that this could be done. All right? This is called the ternary operator. Sometimes it's actually called the question mark colon operator. And it's called ternary because if you do this, if I say this, I'm going to remove this, but if I say x equals -3, -3. If I do that, that's called a unary operator right there because there's only one thing. Okay? If I say x equal y plus z, this plus sign, that's a binary operator because there has to be something to the left and there has to be something to the right. Well, this particular one that you see right here, it's ternary because you need something to the left and something to the right. There's actually 3 of them. All right? There's what comes before the question mark, what comes after the question mark, and what comes after the colon. And this particular operator is available in virtually any language. I know all the ones we use it is. JavaScript has it, C# has it. You can use it in ASP.NET.
What's the single pipe sign do?
These, using a single one like this, if you are using the double pipe sign as an OR, okay, not what we're doing, but it's basically this is an OR, right? Okay, when you use the double pipe sign, it does the short circuiting, meaning if the first one is true, it doesn't check the second one, okay, because it's an OR. When you use a single pipe sign, you're telling it to do both checks anyway. You are forcing it to not do the short circuit evaluation. I can't think of one. But if you, maybe if you want to make sure that every single time you're testing stuff, so you're writing a test plan where you have to test every single scenario, including testing them both. Even though the first one means you don't have to test the second one, you want to do it anyway. All right? And I think they're called like, this is conditional when you have the double, and I think the single is non-conditional. All right? What I'm saying is if that one is true, since that's an OR, you shouldn't have to test that one. All right, and when you think about it, it makes sense because if that's true, it's less than 1,000, right? There's no sense in checking to see if it's greater than 10,000. It couldn't be even if we wanted to because there's no number I know of that's both less than 1,000 and greater than 10,000. All right. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to grab this line of code that I just put in. I don't have to do that, but I'm going to grab that thing I just put in. I'm going to come down here to my initial balance, and I'm going to paste it in. Now, it's not right, so I'm going to make some changes to it. All right. So if my initial balance is, if my initial balance is, we're going to do the same kind of test, basically. Okay, so let me line this stuff up. I'm going to have to make a bunch of changes to it, but it's okay. All right, this is min balance right there. So if it's less than the minimum balance, okay, then what do I know? Yes, actually, this is a much simpler check now that I think about it. I'm asking you this question. If this is the case, what do I know? What? Well, yeah, that's in the second test. But in this test, what do we know? Because we hadn't done air handling yet. They put in less than $25. So, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to set that to min balance. All right? So that's what we'll do if they put in something that's too low. Otherwise, it's $25 or more, so we do this. Now again, I'm asking the question. Does that code make sense? Anybody that it doesn't? Yes.
I mean, it makes sense to me, but like personal preference, is it okay if we do, if and else statements or full professional?
It's totally fine.
Like, we're mostly used to doing things like that, like books and stuff like that. We don't really use this, I guess.
Yes.
I think it's just harder to read.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you still should be programming, but I will tell you, if you're writing a really complex thing where you've got dozens and dozens and dozens of these, what you're going to find is using the if, you're going to be writing 6 to 8 lines. Here you're writing 1. So if you had 50 of those, all right, it's 300 lines as opposed to 50 lines.
So will
Professionals are going to do it this way.
I mean, will jobs?
I mean, if you go apply for a job and you've got ifs, and if somebody would ever call you on that and say, why didn't you use the question mark colon? And you said, because I think my code is more readable. And where I am in my professional career right now, I think readability is really important. I could live with that as a professional, as somebody interviewing you.
What's wrong with asking them to help you understand why they do that?
Nothing. I think they're going to tell you that 2 things. First of all, you're writing less code. Second of all, since you're writing less code, it should execute faster. Now, if you're writing a payroll program like this or a bank account, probably faster execution doesn't mean squat. You don't care anyway.
They explain what those stuff. To me, they explain the scenario and why it's there, and they can explain why it's what it is doing.
But I totally understand what you're saying. The only thing I'll tell you about that, though, is it depends on who you talk to. Because you can ask a person and they can take, like I said, you saw that, I wrote that in that email. I think you're a patient person, from what I've seen. You'd probably make a good tutor. Valerie volunteered last year. I think she would have made a good tutor, because she's a patient person, at least from what I've seen. All right? But you can also deal with a person, and then, because I've dealt with this in the real world. Why do you do it that way? Because I told you to. The first guy I reported to at AT&T was a staff sergeant in the Army. He didn't like it when you called him on anything. Because I would always say, Jim, why'd you do it like this? Finally, after a while, he told me to get effed. He said, I don't think I have to tell you why I did it.
Not why do you do it that way, but what does it mean to do it that way? Would they have a problem with that?
No, but what he would have said was, it's a better way of writing it. If I would have said why, he would have said, because I said so. All right? Now, there's one more thing I've got to do in here, and that is, I've got to set my current balance equal to this dot initial balance, right? I want to make sure there's 2 different variables in there. One is my initial balance. That's what we put in when we open the account. The other one is the current balance. That's the one we're going to keep fidgeting with. Because next we're going to write our deposit, and then we're going to write our withdrawal, and then we're going to write our to-string. Does all that make sense? So we've got 3 more routines here that we have to write. Withdrawal, deposit, and to-string. All right, so I'm going to write first my deposit. Then I'm going to write my withdrawal. And then I'm going to write my to-string. And again, this is just the way that I do things. If you think it's way too frickin' bizarre for me, come up with your own way of doing it. That's totally fine. That's one thing, you know, going back, Ethan, to what you just talked about. I have literally been in the situation where we are under a deadline, and I've had my boss literally sit behind me, watching me write code. But that said, he's never said, why'd you do it that way? Why did you use an if statement in there? Wouldn't a switch have been better? All right, I've never had that happen. And I will tell you that at least in a couple of the cases, it's because the people who were my supervisors, they were great people. They weren't coders. And when they would ask questions, I would be more of the mindset of, do you want to get this done or do you want to talk? And I will tell you, I was at places not even very long where I was known as being a smartass because I would ask that question. You know, my boss would come over there and he'd sit down, hey, how was your weekend? And I'd say, it was good, Bob. I hope yours was too. Do you want this done by the end of the day? And he'd say, yeah. I said, then get the hell out of here. I would say that to him. Because if I'd say, well, you know, would you mind coming back and talking to me later? He would do it. But if I'd say to him, you know, do you want me to get it done? Yes, then get the hell out of here. He'd know that I'm not going to finish it unless he gets the hell out of there. All right? So a lot of people, you know, thought, well, he's a really gruff SOB. Probably because I am. All right? I can live with that. All right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to write my deposit. Public, and it doesn't matter which one you write first. And I put in here double, and I called it D for deposit. You can call it anything you want. Now, many of you wrote this in different ways. Some of them were very intriguing the way you wrote it. All right? But this is how I wrote it. Everybody hear me? This is how I wrote this. If the deposit was greater than 0, all right, then I wanted to plus my total deposits, because I have one more deposit, all right. I want to do my total, what did we call that? Sorry, let me go back up here. I don't remember what we called it. That was deposit amount and withdrawal amount. I changed the names from when I did it before. You wouldn't have liked my names. They weren't really very good. And that plus equals D, and current balance plus equal D. Now, take a look at that. And again, because I'm asking you the question, is there anything that's in that routine right there that doesn't make sense? So imagine I came in here and I just deposited $100. So D is $100. All right? This is my first deposit, so now I've got $25 in here. And I just deposited 100. So my total deposits, which I set to 0, is now going to be 1. The amount that I deposited, my deposit amount, is going to be that amount. All right? So that's going to be 25. My current balance is going to be my current balance, which is 25 plus 100. So my current balance will be 125. Does all that make sense? Because in just a minute, I'm going to put up the one for the withdrawals, which is the same, except that basically you want to subtract. All right? If you can find a bank that's going to let me withdraw and is going to add to my current balance, let me know, because I want to move all my money in there. All right? Probably not going to happen. All right.
So do you want to do that and it says something not allowed if it brings it down to like 25, do you do that somewhere else?
No, it's because I will do that in my withdrawals. This is my deposits. All right? All I'm checking for now you could look and raise your hand and go, does that mean I could deposit $1 gazillion? Well, I guess if you're Jed Clampett on the old Beverly Hillbillies show, maybe. But, you know, I'm trying to be realistic here. We could have a maximum amount you could deposit. That said, and I mentioned this to you before, okay? Let's say that you just won the lottery, and the lottery was worth almost $1 billion, and after taxes you get $500 million. You walk into a bank with that check, They're going to take it, right? All right. So, well, that's what I'll make my maximum. Why would you do that? How many people are going to come into a bank and give you a check for $500 million? Maybe one in your lifetime. Probably that's going to be it. So I wouldn't make, right there, I would not make a maximum. All right. And the only thing for the minimum was, if it's greater than 0, do it. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could handle this. All right, there are a lot of ways that it could be handled. I'm going to copy the whole deposit routine that I just did. I'm going to paste it down here. I'm going to change this to withdrawal. I'm going to change this to a W. All right. And I'm going to say, I made this check a little bit different, so this will be total withdrawals. This will be withdrawal amount. And that'll be minus equal. And that'll be current balance minus equal D. And that's going to be W, not, sorry. So try that again. Move that here. Move that here. Right? All right, so here's my check. This goes back to the question you just asked. I said if the withdrawal is greater than 0, meaning I can't withdraw a negative amount, that just doesn't make any sense. And my current balance minus the withdrawal amount is greater than or equal to the minimum balance. That's how I did it. All right, this has got to be a W, and this has got to be a W. So again, imagine this, okay? Imagine I just put in $25. Now I'm trying to, so this is my current balance. Now I want to do something illegal. Now I want to come in and withdraw $100. All right? So this is equal to 100. All right? So is the withdrawal greater than 0? Yes. Is my current balance minus that greater than 25? Well, is 25 minus 100 at x equals negative 75? So it's not going to do it. But we had not talked about, doing any exception handling. All right? So that's all I put in there. In other words, all it's going to do is nothing. It will not allow that withdrawal to take place. Does that make sense? All right. And like I said, when we were at that point, the reason I did it like that is we had not yet talked about exceptions. All right. So the only thing that's left is our overridden to string method. So public string to string. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines. Okay? move this over.
You can generate a two-string method, like we generate getters and setters.
Well, yeah, you could do it through here. You can code generate,
Why
and
does
you.
it override when you do that?
Why? Pardon me?
It overrides when you do that.
It doesn't override?
Yeah.
All right. That probably means I really should put an add override on here too.
Why?
Okay, because by default, the default behavior of this says that it's just going to print out the address of where that lies in memory. So you're right. That would have been a good idea here to do an add override. All right. And it doesn't like that, so let's see. Cannot resolve.
It's an capital O.
Well, that would be probably why then. There you go. All right. And I didn't do it. Constantly when I go back and look at my own stuff, I'm like, okay, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do this? And most of the time, when you would ask me why, I would probably have no clue. Because when I did it, I didn't do it. That's about all I could tell you. All right, so there's my total deposits, my total withdrawals. Let's copy these. We'll change this to total deposit amounts. And this one will become total withdrawal amount.
Why do we want the getters instead of just the variable?
Because I didn't make getters for these.
I mean, what? Can't you just do a first one?
Because that's the way it's done in object-oriented. That's all I can tell you. That supposedly, that by using the get, you're always grabbing the most recent version, and you're never getting what's called stale data. All right? I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree with you.
Well, that's why, because I just did the generate, like two-string.
And it should still work if you do it that way. All right, now I've done all that, so now I have to return output string. That's the whole thing. That is it for the class. Now we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll write the driver. All right, so take a look. The only thing I will tell you, please look up on the screen here. Everybody look on the screen, anybody who's paying attention at least. With these three variables, I really should have had a decimal formatter for those, because it's going to look ugly. So what I did on mine is I did come in here and say decimal format. I'll just call it F, that's fine, equals new decimal format, and I just gave it a format, $, number, comma, number, comma, number, 0.00. All right. And what that means is now for these three, all right, I don't care about it for the first name or the last name or the account number, but I do care about it for the initial balance. I care about it for the deposit amount, for the withdrawal amount, and the current balance. So these should all be F.format. Format. F.format. And F.format. Now, if you didn't do that, it would still print. It just wouldn't look as nice. It wouldn't have the commas in there, the dollar signs, etc. There are other ways to do it. Did everybody hear me? You could use the string.format, you could use the printf, but there's even other ways of doing it. Java has monetary classes, and you could use those monetary classes where it would do some of that work for you. We don't go into that. There's just, I'm sorry, there's just not enough time to go through it. All right? So that's everything. I'll leave that up there. I'm going to pause this. We are